You are tuned into the Power Chord Hour right here on 107.9 WRFA, as well as on the Power Chord Hour podcast. However you're listening to this, thanks for checking this one out. Very, very excited for this one. I have Chris Ballew here with me of the Presidents of the United States of America. You might know him from his work under the name Casper Baby Pants, and he has a brand new solo record out now called Power Trip, and quite a bit to get into. He's been very prolific with the solo work the last couple of years. So we're going to get into all that with Chris. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good today. Yeah, I'm feeling good. Or as my friend Kurt Block likes to say, at our age, we're reasonable.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Such a good, I'm very excited to talk to you. I mean, I've been a fan forever, and there's a lot of different music to get into with you. But I want to start off with the new stuff. Like, if people don't know, the last couple of years, you've been putting out quite a few solo records. And if I'm not mistaken, on your website, it says that you're going to be putting out 2 new albums a year for the next few years, January and July of each year. So, I mean, how has that been with that process? Because I don't know if that's either very helpful to have deadlines like that or to have that goal, or if that's like, if it makes it that much harder.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't ever sit down in my studio and say to myself, okay, I'm making the next album. I'm constantly writing and recording and revising and editing and, working on songs in various stages of repair or disrepair all the time. So I have this big vat. I think right now I have about 87 songs that are unreleased, but virtually finished. I just keep listening to them in the car and going, oh, that bass needs to do something there, or making little notes. And then songs fall out of the sky. And, I have new stuff I'm working on too. But basically, I'm working on a big bunch of songs all the time. When it comes time to make an album, with the help of a couple of co-producers who have pretty sharp ears, they help me, and I put in my 2 cents about just skimming the cream of the crop off the top, and that's an album. So I'm liberated from the pressure of feeling like I'm making an album, and without that pressure, and with sort of more of an approach as a hobbyist, like I just do this because it makes my day full and fun, and all those forces combined to make this a low stress, easy thing. I could put out 3 records a year if I wanted to. I just need to give myself a little break sometime. But yeah, it's really fun. And I'm free of the pressures that I used to slave under when songwriting, and I just feel like liberated and light and free. And that's the sound I'm making with this music.
Did anything inspire that? Like, and even specifically like the January, July thing? I mean, anything, the 2 albums, the months, anything like that, like inspire those specifics? Or is this just kind of one day like, hey, that sounds like a good idea to do the next couple of years?
No, I think it just sort of presented itself because of the volume of songs. It's interesting because during my whole life, I've had these like arcs, like the President arc and the Casper Baby Pants arc. And now I'm on this solo record arc. And the commonality with it is when I find a purpose, like a reason to make the music, and a palette, like a selection of sounds or like ideas that I realize are inside that purpose or outside that purpose, then all these songs just flow. So yeah, it wasn't something I planned. It was just like the first record was ready, and I think it came out in mid-January of 2001, maybe. And then I realized, well, I could have the next one ready for July. And then the pattern kind of set itself and started to feel good. So it was really more intuitive. Again, it's never like I'm pushing, battleships around a map of Europe trying to figure out how to invade.
Nothing that crazy.
No, nothing that premeditated at all.
How about because, I know you do pretty much, these solo records, truly all you, besides, like you said, you have a couple extra ears and they're like co-producers.
Yeah.
So, obviously I know there's a difference when I ask this, but like, what are the differences between when you're writing something solo like this versus in a full band setting when you're writing an album with 2 other guys, with 3 other guys, and then also having the producers and other kind of outer powers besides yourself? This sounds very much insular. This is very much you. Like, what are some of the biggest differences in making albums this way versus with like a full band setting?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very different. And for me, it's had to do with the journey of understanding myself and how I am most comfortable being with the creative process. Being in a band and being in a studio where the clock's ticking and there's other people involved and everybody's waiting and you have a finite, like in 2 weeks, we are making this record. It just I enjoyed the challenge back in the day, but it never felt comfortable. And now the way I work is, like I said, working on a big batch and giving the songs lots of time to breathe and kind of, be figured out. Um, I will often, I number every mix. And when I'm mixing now, I'll get up in the mix number 30. Whereas with the band or working with a group of people, you're really just mix one or two or three, you don't have the time. Plus, it's really fun these days to be ruthless. Like, I might decide after I finish the first draft of a song, oh, this song does not need drums at all, or this song needs a synthesizer bass, not a real bass, or a drum machine instead of a drummer. And I don't have to bum anyone out by telling them, you know what, we're erasing your entire guitar track because we don't need it. And so the ego issue is gone. The only ego I harm is my own. And another advantage of taking a long time to work on a song is that I forget about all the work I put into that solo or whatever when I realize the solo was wrong. So yeah, it's a softer blow for sure when I make sweeping edits. Yeah, I feel like I'm way more of a mad scientist, especially historically. I've always had a 4-track, or in the early days when I was a teenager, it was two boom boxes going back and forth, sound on sound kind of thing. And I've always had this very healthy, even with the presidents were a big deal and everything was happening, I'd have a lot of time by myself in my studio. It's just this mad scientist all alone in my studio sort of thing is way more who I really am at my core. So it's been interesting. And I'd advise anyone out there who's, just trying to figure out their creative identity, think about how you really feel in your body when you're working with others versus working alone. I'm not saying one is better than the other by any means. Everybody's built differently, but I think some people bend themselves out of shape trying to do one or the other when it's not a natural fit. So that's been a long journey for me, and I feel like I've really settled.
I think you kind of answered it in that, but like I always like asking like the studio side of things. I mean, because at the same time you have to be doing that with your role, but like, do you enjoy that fine tuning? If it, like the example I always use is, could you enjoy yourself EQing a snare drum for 3 days? Could you have a fun time doing that?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But especially because I'm using Pro Tools and an older version of Pro Tools, and I don't have crazy plugins. I don't even use MIDI. I don't get fancy. I use Pro Tools basically like a 24-track tape recorder that I can get in and cut and edit. And just EQs and editing are kind of my main tools. So yes, when it comes time to like finding the right, especially with vocals, I love using kind of that honky Video Killed the Radio Star setting as kind of one approach to vocals, or like a full EQ'd kind of rich sounding vocal. And I'm constantly like just sliding between that like honky and rich flavor, trying to figure out like with the message of the song and the music and and I'll toy with the EQ on a vocal for an entire day. And it's so fun because at the end of the day, I'm like, what? It's the end of the day. That's crazy. So I feel like when time melts away and evaporates, that's when you know that you're doing something right, no matter what it is, whatever your hobby is, or whatever keeps that sort of sense of doom at bay. Do it.
Is there like, I mean, including from doing so many things with this solo, I mean, you're playing all the instruments, you're obviously the producer as well and all that. Is there anything that you get to kind of do that don't normally, like say like drums or something like that? I mean, do you just kind of jump in and do some stuff that like you enjoy doing, but normally you're not really doing if you're going to record a record?
Oh, totally. I was just working on this crazy, weird song called Problem Solution because all this stuff in my life was breaking. My car broke down. Our bathtub was running for 2 weeks while we were out of town. All this stuff happened. And I was like, well, there's a problem and there's a solution. And I started writing this song, and it's very weird and very bizarre. I actually used the speech to text or text to speech feature on my laptop to make a robotic chorus vocal. So I'm constantly doing stuff that's odd or bizarre or very quiet or very loud, and it's just super fun to follow that intuitive randomness. When I started this solo thing, one of my co-producers, Pete Droge, was like, we should really think about taking these songs and having a real drummer play on them and kind of giving them a little more of like that band vibe. And you know what? I was interested for a second, and I thought, I don't want to do that. I really want this to feel like a communication from an individual soul out in the, expanse or whatever. Like I want the listener to feel like it's very much coming from one brain, one isolated human to another, kind of. So it's a subtle thing, but I feel like, especially with drums, you mentioned drums, like I always look for cavemanish. I want cavemanish drums, like the simplest, dumbest drumming, and then have the rhythm and all the other complexity happen in the guitars and the basses and stuff. But yeah, I don't want people to listen to this music and think about how tasty the drummer is. I want them to just enjoy the musicality of the song as a whole. You know what I mean? Like I'm not after virtuosity, or I'll take very simple solos. I'm constantly like turning down the virtuosity and trying to figure out what's the simplest way I can play this. So it's an interesting, that's a color in my paint box that I didn't play with before.
So that's still that's like almost newer in your songwriting, or like, I guess the way you write and record and all that. You would say you've been doing that forever. That's still somewhat recent, if you will.
Yeah, it is, definitely. I mean, back when I was, in previous years, when I was being the sort of mad scientist all by myself, there was also a healthy dose of like trying to be someone else. I was fascinated with Wall of Voodoo growing up, and I used to sing like Stan Ridgway. And then I was really into the new romantic new wave era, and I would sing with a fake English accent. So I was doing all these stupid moves that really weren't me. So it took a while to kind of figure out my vocabulary, and kind of, really try to represent who I am as a little individual human being. Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier about like with song ideas, like it does sound, you'll kick them around, you'll play with them for a while. Is there though, like for you, because I feel like some people will, you kind of know when a song's going to work right away. Like, is there like X amount of time, it's going to work before you go, you know what, let me take this and put it away and maybe I'll play with it later. I mean, is there generally a time for that when you go, okay, maybe this works later, but maybe it's time to put it away and not keep spending time on this?
Yeah, I use my boredom factor in that case. Like if something starts to grow, like I'll come in my studio and I just hit something on the piano that feels cool. Oh, okay, let's see what that's doing. As soon as I get bored, I just stop. And if I don't get bored all the way to making a final mix, then that's it. But if I get bored after putting on a guitar and a bass, I just stop. Now I don't throw it away. I put it in another folder where later I might scoot along and listen to all these little fragments, or I might write lyrics that need music. And I'll go back to all these kind of fragmentary instrumentals in different stages of disrepair and try to find music that fits these new lyrics that are showing up. So yeah, the boredom factor is a big one to listen to. If you start to get, kind of disinterested in what you're doing, just stop doing it. But then again, there are songs I have where I'll just be like, the idea behind this song is so important. I had a song called Bird on the Run for a long time. And it was kind of like metaphorically about not realizing how capable we are as individuals of transcending our limitations and our attachments and stuff. But it just didn't, musically, it just wasn't that fun to listen to. And conceptually, the Bird on the Run line didn't really work. But I worked it up into like, 28 mixes or something, like over the course of like years. Finally, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to take the essence of this song and I'm going to completely strip everything away and approach it from a new angle. And I turned it into a song called Gravity Trap. And it's way better. It's way groovier. But I had to take that failed version all the way to the end in order to realize, you know what, I got to hop off the train and get on a completely different train and figure it out. And now it's like one of my favorite songs. So there's value for me. And I always feel like every song has in its DNA something true and real that's worth exposing and expanding on. But sometimes that little nugget of truth is covered with crap, And so sometimes it's a matter of like finally realizing, okay, this first idea was not best idea. I need to open it up and redo it. So that's been a cool, satisfying process.
Did you have to learn that at all? Because like, again, I do think there is really something to be said about, you're working on a song and maybe it's not working the moment, but it'll work later on. I mean, have you have you always kind of been that way, or is that something where you had to kind of learn, where maybe earlier on it was like maybe you did have some gold and you just didn't realize it at the moment, you would scrap things maybe a little too early? I mean, have you always been this way, or is
No.
this like you now and you had to kind of learn that?
Yeah, I would, back in the olden days, say when I started songwriting in the early 80s and through to the 90s even, it was really first idea was best idea. I didn't spend a ton of time rewriting.
Mm,
Um, and in fact, there are some President songs where I'm like, we really should have like reapproached that later stuff. The debut album is a perfect moment, so I have no complaints with that record. But yeah, it took me a while to kind of realize that I have the ability to stop and go, that's not working. Now, one of the super cool things about that idea of a nugget of truth is that I'm going back and reviving or reanimating songs I wrote in the early 80s and mid 80s that had this kind of like similar thematic yearning that I have now, but were just the DNA, the good DNA was really covered in junk, like terrible, terrible, weird 4-track recordings and sound on sound and out of tune synthesizers and me with an English accent. But I'm shaving away all that stuff and I'm finding these like wonderful intentions. And now that I have like a handle on my craft, I'm finishing them basically. So it's kind of like I'm collaborating with my 21-year-old self. It's pretty great. I
that's
dig it.
that's really cool. Which
Yeah.
actually, kind of with that, like when you're using those older ideas, you're going back and doing that. Do you almost, when you're now reapproaching that song, using those ideas, do you feel like you're now approaching them as current day Chris Ballew, or do you feel like you do almost try to go back and write in whatever, kind of voice? Again, like you said, if you're using an idea you wrote when you were 21, are you trying to finish that in the same mindset as a 21-year-old Chris Ballew, or are you trying to finish that like current day? If
I
that
think
makes
it kind of depends on how much crap was around the DNA nugget. Like sometimes I just did one. I think it's even on my latest record called Memory Ball,
oh,
and
nice.
that's a song I've been toying with since probably like the late 80s, 87, 88, something like that. Yeah, 87. I remember 87. Now I have a weird old little 4-track recording of an instrumental version before I'd finished the words, and I did this guitar solo that's so tasty, just like one of those rare moments where a one-take guitar solo in my old 4-track days just totally worked. And so I learned that guitar solo and totally represented it. Same, I even went out and bought the same guitar that I
That's
had. Yeah,
amazing.
it was a Guild, like a red flat top Guild acoustic. I went and bought it and played the exact solo on the new thing because that solo was part of the good DNA of the song. So I saved it. But a lot of other ones just get, just the sort of vibe or like I had a song called Cadillac Blue, one of my earliest songs. It was kind of like this, I'm adrift in suburbia kind of yearning songs. I ended up changing it to a song on my second record. I can't remember which record it's on, called Venomous Blue. And it's more about dealing with, you know, the aspiration to be famous and successful, getting that fulfilled, and then finding that it's not made me happy, which is kind of a theme that you're hearing more and more about these days. But anyway, so yeah, they're all different, really. And it really depends on, I apply my current day Chris Ballew critical mind to my freeform, imitating my hero's 21-year-old self. And somewhere in there, we have a collaboration.
I like that. I really like that. I think you get some really cool ideas. It's nice, again, like as a fan, hearing there's so much of you obviously in the solo stuff because you're doing everything, and then another collaborator is basically past you,
Yeah.
the old you you're also collaborating with.
I know it's kind of solipsistic and weird, but it's intentional. Like I'm intentionally trying to make music that sounds intimate, like it came from somebody's insides. And my sort of visualization that I use for how people listen to this music is I like to imagine them lying down with headphones and dancing while they're lying down, just a little bit. And that kind of helps me inform, like when I'm doing the mixes, like, is this helping this, Mr. or Mrs. Headphone lie down dancey person? And then I might make mix adjustments based on that visualization.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Have you been recording? I mean, have all these solo records, I mean, all been kind of done in your own studio? Have you been recording everything in your own studio?
Oh yeah, definitely. That was another thing when Pete was suggesting a drummer. I was like, well, the process of going through that, like, all right, we got to get all the files over to a real studio. We got to book it. We got to get a drummer. We got to figure out what he's going to play. We got to go home. We got to mix it. And then what if I do all that and realize it's the wrong beat or the wrong sound, you know? So yeah, it's very intentional that it's small and personal, and that by extension, yes, I work by myself. I have one microphone, I have a laptop, I have an M box, a couple speakers, and a piano, and a iPad full of synthesizers that I trigger with the piano. So, and that's it. It's the smallest. Here, I know this won't translate to audio only, but you
It
know,
is
just
YouTube. People will see it on YouTube.
oh, okay. Well, there's guitars, and that's my 3-string from Casper Baby Pants. I played that guitar. I played that guitar when I was with Beck doing slide. That's a recent acquisition. I got my Paul McCartney bass. I got the very first 2-string that Mark Sandman turned me on to. I got the 2-string. That's the 2-string I played on the debut album. And the little 3-string. And then I've got this Yamaha piano and an iPad, and then just a little laptop and a couple of French monitors.
And you have everything you need.
I have everything I need. It's great. And a lot of imagination. So
Also, I mean, like on top of that, you do the artwork for the albums as well, right?
right, yeah. When a few times during the last 5 or 6 years, music has kind of like dried up a little bit, which I allow. It's totally fine. You got to let the fields go fallow so you can grow new crops. So I'll walk away from music for a little while, and sometimes the creative impulse is replaced by the impulse to draw. And I got bit by the drawing bug a couple of times. I've had shows here on Vashon Island where I live at a gallery here a couple times. And yeah, when it came time to make art for these new records, I was like, well, I've already made this art and it really feels connected thematically. Like I was making art about, a lot of the art was about the negotiation between my consciousness and my ego. Like your ego is like this big army of little selves that will kind of yell and shout and make you behave not great ways, like make you be judgmental or selfish or defensive or whatever. So I've kind of got this dialogue going with all these parts, and a lot of the drawings were about that. A lot of the lyrics and the music are about that. So I felt like thematically they kind of went together. Yeah, so that's been a really cool thing. I did go to art school, and I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, so I'm technically an artist.
Nice, nice. For like you kind of brought it up there too, because I wanted to ask, like, you know, because yeah, obviously you need to take breaks from things at times. I'm sure, like, I mean, it's nice you have drawing to go to that, you know, to take a break from music. Do you have anything that like for that like creative outlets? Is there anything do you feel like influences your creativity that's maybe non-conventional? Like it could be maybe you go out hiking and that makes you like want to write a song, like things like that. Do you have those unconventional things where if you're getting writer's block, you're just not feeling creative, doing that might actually, you know, light a fire under you?
Yeah. A couple things. Definitely nature. I mean, I live on an island on about an acre of land, and we have a little walking path that we have that goes around the perimeter of the property. And just, you know, if I'm working real hard, I've been in here for an hour and a half, couple hours working, I'll just like stop and I'll go out and walk the path and just think about what I'm trying to accomplish in the studio. And a lot of times, like maybe a line in a chorus that I haven't settled on will click when I'm walking and just looking at nature. So that's a really good one. The other one is I love biographies. I love watching documentaries about other creative people. And lately, they've been sparking songs. I wrote a song about Andy Warhol.
Oh, nice.
I wrote a song about David Bowie. I wrote a song about Iggy Pop.
Oh,
they're all like just inspired by these, steeping myself in someone else's life and their arc and their creativity. Those kinds of movies, those kinds of documentaries I find really inspiring. And not everyone sparks a song, but it's a place where I can kind of feel this like really clear, empathetic tug towards someone else's inner life. And I like kind of making poetry out of that and turning it into a song. So it's been fun.
Drawing and music, I mean, obviously two big old creative outlets for you. Do you have any other, like, do you have anything else you'd consider like a creative outlet, or does all your kind of creative energy go into music and drawing?
Yeah, I read a great book. My friend Joel recommended this book called How to Fly a Horse, and it basically is about democratizing creativity and the concept of creativity to be like making a sandwich is a creative act. So for me, like cooking is making food is creative. I love that. Um, you know, and that's about it. No, actually, working in the yard work. I hated historically. I've hated yard work during the pandemic and all the associated anxiety with the pandemic. I found that if I went out and just started plucking weeds and maintaining the path and moving firewood around, I felt fine. I felt great. So I've become attached to the creative aspect of, like just weeding a path. I remember I was in Japan one time and I saw these old ladies in a garden working on this absolutely just tight manicured lawn. And they were going in with tweezers and just taking little bits of weed or little bits of dirt out. And they each had like a 12 by 12 inch square that they were working on. And that's it. They were just working on that. And then they'd move to the next square. And I just thought, wow, the sort of peace and dedication and, in some senses, creativity, they're creating this field of absolute perfection. That was really inspiring. It was really cool. And I revisit those ladies whenever I'm in the yard working on weeds. I'm a little more like, I hack away a little bit more than they would, but similar idea, like, one patch at a time. I guess I look at songs that way too. Like, let me take time with this patch, this song, this idea, and kind of, really tweezer out the weeds. After I've given myself the first phase, which is make a huge mess, then I go through and tweezer the weeds. I'm going to start calling that weed tweezering.
Tweezer. Honestly, like when you were talking about that, it made me think of music because I mean, going in there and tweezing those specific pieces of grass and stuff like that, I don't feel like that's terribly different from spending days EQing a snare drum or something. You got to be meticulous. Like you can't get that out of thin air. You have to have that patience to do that too.
Yeah. It's interesting. Until this moment, I hadn't realized that those old Japanese ladies have also influenced my mixing process. So.
You didn't know it. Now you do.
I didn't know it. That's so great.
On top of a power trip, I do know you also have a new release called Volume 1. That's a compilation of your favorite songs off your first 4 solo records. You got a copy?
Yeah, I got a copy right here.
Oh, very nice for everyone watching.
It's the four characters from the first 4 albums. That's kind of.
I love your drawings. I got to say too, they do work very well with the albums.
Thank you. And this album's cool. It comes with all the lyrics on the inner sleeve.
Oh, nice.
And it also comes with a zine that's got all my sort of like explanations or backstories for all the songs and a bunch of embarrassing photos from when I was, writing embarrassing songs back in the old days. See, me and my white hot tuxedo.
Oh, that rules.
80s. It's the 80s. So anyway, yeah, those are on bandbox.com if anybody wants one. So go there and get one. It's a limited run, so get them while they're hot.
Was it easy? The thing I was wondering with that, I mean, was it easy to figure out the songs to include, or is that a difficult task? Because this is playing favorites with your own music.
Yeah, well, there's every album has 3 singles, so I started there. And there were a couple choices for singles that ultimately I didn't think I chose the best song. One change was influenced by actually Chris Novoselic, a bass player from Nirvana. When I sent him my first solo record, he zeroed in on a song called Radar Mind, and he just loved it. And he would send me little videos of him like at a hardware store listening to the Radar Mind on his phone or something. And so his affinity for that song sort of made me replace what I had as a single with that one. But otherwise, there weren't that many changes. So it's really just the singles from those 3. And then I kind of, sequence them in a way that makes sense for side A, side B. And it's pretty fun. I'm not doing any physical media for this new stuff. I got tired of like, in a sense, in a long-term sense, it's tomorrow's garbage, so I'm trying to avoid more stuff in the landfills. With solo projects that didn't really spark and I thought were going to be huge, over my life, I've thrown away. I've watched a lot of CDs go in the landfill.
Oh, geez.
So I'm trying to stop that, stem the tide by, going digital only.
I do know. I mean, you said you're releasing that through Bandbox. I know there's been some Presidents reissues, a couple different things through them. I mean, how'd you kind of start working together with Bandbox? I know there's been a couple releases now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they reached out to me or one of us in the Presidents. I think, that's funny. I can't remember how they popped up in our lives, but yeah, they've been really good to work with. They're very willing to take risks and do stuff. And we're plotting doing more Presidents vinyl with them. We'd love to eventually do all the albums and then make a box set kind of thing. So, and then I'm going to continue every 4 solo records. I'm going to put out another vinyl with them. That's why Volume 1 is Volume 1. There'll be Volume 2 and Volume 3 and on, as long as the songs flow.
I was gonna say, you don't really have like an end date for that, right? For doing the 2 albums a year. I mean, this is just kind of, would you say, for foreseeable future?
Yeah, foreseeable future. I mean, I made as Casper Baby Pants when I was making music for 0 to 5-year-olds and their parents. I started that, and it was just like an avalanche of songs, and I just kept going and playing shows and more albums. I ended up making 19 albums. And these albums have 20 songs on them, so I'm not slouching. And I worked very hard on that stuff. I mean, people think, oh, you make music for little kids. It must have been so refreshing because it's so easy. You can say anything. It's actually the opposite. I had to really pay attention to like little story arcs and character development because I put the vocals right up front. Anyway, it was a lot of work. But what happened with that was, yeah, I thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life. And then it just sort of naturally arced. And I was like, well, I've said all I have to say, and I'm kind of ready to stop playing live. And I'd let it go. So I don't know when this arc will end, and I don't know what the next arc will be. So I'm really, in a sense, following my impulses. I'm not scripting this at all. I'm just kind of at the mercy of the path being lit just a couple steps ahead of where I am.
Do you have any interest with the solo stuff of ever, do you think it's going to stay strictly a studio project, or could you see doing a one-off, like compiling a live band and doing a one-off here? I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you're like playing tours or anything like that, but could you see doing something in a live setting with these solo records?
Boy, my favorite saying is never say never, but nice. Because when the Presidents broke up and spent 5 years broken up and then got back together, that was a total never say never. I had no idea that would happen. So I've learned my lesson with saying never. I don't do it. And sometimes when I'm mixing this stuff, I do make choices based on a visualization where I'm in front of 50,000 people at a festival in Germany and everyone's singing along like they're going to want this to happen 4 more times. So I'll put that in, but it's all just, dust in the wind right now. The idea of the work it would take to do something like this with a band and do it live, it just makes me feel heavy and sad.
Taking the fun out of it now, it doesn't sound as fun now.
If someday that makes me feel good and light and happy, yeah, I'll look into it. But right now, I just love the quiet of my life. I've flown so many miles. I've played so many shows. With Casper Baby Pants alone, I played 1,300 shows. The Presidents did almost 700 over the course of their whole arc. And, there's just a point where you're like, I've been there, done that. That's good. I'm going to let my record stand and kind of find a new voice. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Any song, obviously you haven't played them live, but even going off that, like that mindset of, thinking about these songs from a big crowd, are there any songs off the new record, any of your solo stuff, that you feel like would transfer really well live? Like, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so it's off the top of your head, but like, do any songs you go, wow, that would be one that gets a good crowd response, or that one I could really see people being into?
Yeah, I guess the one that pops into my mind is Primitive God from the album Primitive God. I was kind of trying to ape Kashmir a little bit by Led Zeppelin, and in an extension of that, I was imagining it live. So, and it's got that like high vocal in the chorus, which would soar out over and be, echo through the arena. There's a couple songs, like new songs I'm working on, that would definitely play live really well. But yeah, Primitive God pops into mind. The title track from the new album, Power Trip, that would be
a good one.
Super fun. Yeah, basically all the loud songs.
I think you're right. I think those would transfer.
Yeah, that'd be the set list. I'd just be like loud, 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 loud.
Well, just a couple more for you here. I mean, having a blast talking to you, talking to music and everything. I did want to ask, I mean, obviously a few days ago, sadly, Wayne Kramer did pass, and Presidents fans kick out the jams. I mean, I know I've seen some great video of you playing with him. Did you get to know him at all over the years? Did you get to know Wayne at all or anything like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a whole story. That I'll try to do it fast, but the initial answer to us changing the lyrics to kick out the jams and Weird Alifying it basically from the MC5 camp was no, you can't do it.
Really?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was coming from Patti Smith, who is Fred Sonic Smith's beneficiary, or was with him and inherited his legacy. Wayne was really the one who convinced everyone that they should say yes to our version. One day I realized after the album had been out and everything, I realized, we never gave Wayne Kramer a gold record, which was the thing you did back in the 90s. You get a gold record all framed. We did that through the label. And then he called me at home about 2 months later and said, I was very touched by you sending me this award. And it got me thinking about the process I went through to say yes to you covering the song and changing the lyrics. And it really was this process where I loosened my grip on our legacy. I felt like I was becoming the man if I said no, like I was cutting off progress and innovation. And it really reorganized my attitude about our whole catalog and our legacy as a band. And so we bonded over that and became real friendly right away. I used to go to LA. I was trying to do film soundtrack work, commercial work, TV show theme songs. I'd go every summer for 2 weeks and I'd hang out with Wayne on those trips. We'd get together for a barbecue. We went bowling, we did all this fun stuff. And every so often I'd go to LA. I'd have a party. I actually introduced Weird Al to Wayne at a party that I organized at a friend's house.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was. I kind of sat back. I like Wayne, Al, Wayne. Kind of look at that. So yeah, it was. We interacted over the years. He jumped up on stage and played with us in LA a couple times. We played Kick Out the Jams with Wayne on guitar, and so yeah, we just kept in touch and had a great time. And I donated to his cause, Jail Guitar Doors, quite a bit. It's an amazing organization. I won't go into it, but so yeah, when he passed away, it hit me in the heart, and I'm real sad. I did not know he was sick. I think what he had took him over real fast, and so yeah, it was a blow for sure.
No, absolute legend. I wanted to ask that if you had any stories, but yeah, great.
Well, and the main story for me is getting to play live with the MC5 when they were doing the MC. Wasn't the MC50? It was the MC30 or 40. Or I can't remember what year it was, but I got to play with them when Dennis, the drummer, Michael, the bass player, and Wayne were all still alive.
Oh, man, that had to be amazing.
Yeah, I had 3/5 of the MC5 for that live show, and that's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's a real cool experience. It's super fun.
That is absolutely amazing. That's very, very cool. As we kind of start closing this out again, you've been at it a long time, prolific songwriter. One more about songwriting. For someone who's been doing it so long, do you feel like your approach has changed a whole lot throughout the years? Like, if you still, even though you're a different person, do you approach a song differently than you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago? Like, is that always changing, or has it stayed pretty consistent throughout the decades?
It's absolutely changed. It's interesting because I used to really consider the music a slave to the lyrics. And then the lyrics were really trying to kind of paint a specific silly or fun or surreal picture. And with the Presidents and with Casper Baby Pants, it was really all about sort of illuminating a narrative with the lyrics. And then the music kind of would support that atmosphere. These days, it's way more intuitive. Like, I'm not visualizing something and writing a description of it. I'm kind of more like waiting for phrases or melodies to kind of drop into my, being or whatever. And only later will they, like, I might think of a lyrical turn of phrase, 1 week, And then 2 weeks later, this music pops up and I realize, oh, those two go together. Interesting. So there's this kind of intuitive, patient waiting game that I'm playing now, where songs are way more abstract than they used to be lyrically. And that's allowing me to kind of just wait and be patient and allow them to happen. Now, sometimes they happen fast, sometimes they happen fast, but I don't necessarily, like before I'd get an idea and I'd be like, oh, go, I got to develop that. Oh, it might go away, because I had this sort of, hit maker mentality, because we had a big first record and then the second record came along and they're all like, well, write us more hits. And I was like, I'm like a monkey with a blindfold that did a painting that everybody wants. And now I've got to like do the painting over and over again, but I don't know what I did because I'm a monkey with a blindfold. So that pressure was really destructive. And it took me 5 years to get so that I could, when the Presidents broke up the first time, it took me 5 years to just be able to sit down and play without an internal voice desperately grabbing at what might be a hit single. So now I've arrived at a place where I'm just like very slow and open and random and intuitive. And it's really nice. Like songs come in little like generous shards and bits, and then I have to kind of assemble them. So it's way more kind of like a walk in the woods than it used to be. Before it used to be like a sprint through the underbrush where I'm getting scraped by all the brambles and everything. And now it's just like a gentle walk in the woods.
Now you kind of see the trees and you stop, you look at the mushrooms, you kind of identify things.
Actually, there's a song on the new record called Turn Into the Tree that's exactly about that.
Oh, nice.
It's about how much I admire the sort of patience of trees. I look at trees and I don't judge them. I just say like, wow, you are really patient.
As somebody who, besides doing radio, if I'm not doing this, I like to get lost in the woods. So get the same thing. I can just look at an old growth tree or something and appreciate it and get out. In Pacific Northwest, you're in one of my favorite parts for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Where are you?
I'm in Western New York. I'm like 90 minutes south of Buffalo. Real close to the Canadian border and the PA border.
Oh, I know it well. My sister-in-law lives in Rochester. So
I'm like 3 hours away.
Yeah, and her parents live in Ohio, so we drive right through there, going back and forth between Rochester and Ohio. So.
There's a good chance you've been through Jamestown, New York, then.
Probably, yeah.
Nice. Well, we have the new music from you. Anything else on the horizon in the world of Chris Ballew that we should let people know about? Anything else coming up?
Well, nah, just more of the same, really. I'm on a plane. I can't complain, as Mr. Cobain said. Just more of the same. I'm working on new stuff. I think so I have album 6 is Power Trip, and the next album 7, I'm just kind of starting to put together. So I have no idea what it's going to be called yet or anything, but boy, I've got some real amazing, crazy shit that I'm excited to share. So yeah, just more crazy shit.
Where do we send people? Where do we go listen to Power Trip? Where do we find you online? All that good stuff.
Well, I'm on the old Instagram at Chris Ballew, but a good place, a good hub to start is just chrisballew.org. And if you go there, you can not only see the new releases and stuff, but there's a ton of unreleased songs and instrumentals. And I have made ambient music for meditation or for putting on behind creative work or whatever. I get a lot of emails from writers saying they like my ambient music for writing. So there's all kinds of treasure digging to be had on the website of stuff that's either discontinued or never before released. So a lot of it. So check that out.
Nice. Yeah. Anything else to let the good people know before we close this out? Which, if they're listening to the radio show, we're going to play it's a 3-hour radio show. We'll play Power Trip front to back.
So my God, that's great. That's so fun, because when I make these records, the other thing ritual I do is I hand in the record and the singles 3 months before the release date. And then I do not listen to it at all until the release date. And then I give myself a treat. I put on headphones, I lie down, and I just journey through a record I've forgotten. And And so I guess I'm envious of your listeners because they have never heard this record either, and they're about to. And that's one of my favorite states for my own music.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and we're commercial free. They'll hear it uninterrupted. There won't be like a commercial for McDonald's in between track 3 and 4 or anything like that. They'll hear it uninterrupted.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Can you imagine a future where people do that? Why has that not happened yet in the world of commercialization? Like, there's bands have used to be paid to have their songs in movies, and now labels will pay to have the band's song in a movie. I mean, you could pay for your whole record by putting commercials on it.
That's the one thing you're missing. I hope on the next one, I really hope on the next solo record, there's just an insurance commercial here, maybe like a fast food one.
Oh my God, that's like, and I'm imagining on vinyl, like marrying the old experience of listening to records with a totally new, like terrible, crass commercial situation.
What you have to do, volume 2 of your collection is going to be your favorite commercials from your solo records. It's just a collection of your favorite ads.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. That's blowing my mind.
Well, Chris, I mean, this is amazing. This has been great. Again, if you're listening to the radio show, you're about to hear Power Trip. If you're listening to the podcast, go listen to Power Trip. Go get that. And we'll play some more music right now. I'm Anthony Merchant talking to Chris Ballew right here on the Power Chord Hour.